Morning, everybody. I'm going to share a technique with you this morning about adding iridescence on your decoy, or the appearance of iridescence. In this case, I'm not going to use an iridescent-based paint or an interference-based paint. I'm going to use just a regular flat pigment to give the impression of color on this bobtail bluebill's head. I learned this technique from Mr. Willie McDonald from the Duck Blind. He's basically been a mentor to me for years on how to do things, how to improve my decoy making. I've learned from other places. I've learned from trial and error. I learned from watching and talking to other folks. I learned that over the last probably 20 years off the internet, as we've been able to have the entire world at our fingertips compared to the old days where you'd go and sit in somebody's shop and learn. I tend to like sitting in somebody's shop and learning, and I've tried to use that technique myself, and I've garnered a lot of gain and improvement in my decoys. And when I talk about decoys and improvement, what I really want you to take to heart when you see me doing this is that the decoy has to look good to you, to your own personal satisfaction. You're the one that has to sit there in the blind and watch it all day long. Remember that the final judge of whether or not your decoy works, floats, and looks good is the bird that comes in and tries to land in your set and gives you an opportunity for gunning. So if you want, take to heart some of what you might see, use it for your own, but get out and investigate on your own too. Try things. It's paint. You can always paint over if you don't like the effect. But try some things until you find stuff that's your comfort level. Take in all this different information and make it your own and make it your own and make it work for you to your personal satisfaction. And hopefully that leads to your real satisfaction out in the duck blind and enjoying gunning over your own handmade decoys. So going to be a couple stills, maybe a couple little bit of video things here and there just to show you what I'm doing. I'll talk a little bit, or I'll type a little bit about what I'm doing and what I'm using. And I'll tell you, on this I'm going to use, and this is an old bottle of Traditions, and it's Traditions Deco Art. This is a flat matte acrylic paint. I use acrylic. I've used oils in the past. I like to use acrylic right now. Who knows what I'll use in the future. I'll try things and see what I like. But anyway, this is an opportunity just for you to see a technique and maybe use it on your own. All right, thanks. Here we go. So first things first, I've got my surface that I'm going to work with. In this case, it's that bluebill head. It's been painted with a flat black, carbon black acrylic. Prior to that, I did texturing, and I used a texture paste. I also used some Golden's heavy body paint on this. Heavy body is just a thicker paint that tends to hold on to its texture when you lay it in. And I used a sponge to sponge on the texture, then I let it dry. Now what that does is it's created a tooth, and you can kind of sort of see the tooth on there, the texture, the bumps that have come up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use those bumps to my advantage, and I'm going to do what's called a dry brush technique. I'll show you that now. All right, so as the name implies, this is a dry brush technique. So I'm starting with a brush that's dry, and this one is completely dry. It was a little moist after I cleaned it up. I actually hit it with the hair dryer just to make sure all the bristles are dry. Down here is some of that Traditions flat acrylic, light gray. I like to use light gray for this technique. I'm going to load up my brush, and you can see when I load up my brush, I'm not loading all the way up to the ferrule, to the metal part. I've just got the tips of the bristles loaded up, hopefully even. And I'm going to brush off a little excess amount of that pigment. And I'm going to come over here to my towel, and I'm actually going to towel it off a little bit too. I'm going to come over here and check to see if I'm laying any pigment down. I can actually load a little more than that if I need. But so now I'm going to go to what I call my canvas at this point, and that's actually that black flat field on this bluebill's head. Now I'm going to lay in this gray, and what's going to happen is this gray is going to become the canvas for the green pigment that I'm going to lay in here. And that green pigment is what's going to give it the effect of iridescence. So, and the thing about the spectrum, this dark black on the spectrum, if I was to paint the green onto it just the way it is, I'd get a bit of a green cast, but the dark pigment would eat that green up. It would take all the light away from it, and it would make it look, it just wouldn't stand out the way the iridescence does. If I do this with this gray, and I'm going to lightly brush this over here, and hopefully you can see sort of how it's starting to just come and stick to the top of that texture. I'm lightly brushing it over. And I like to use a technique that just kind of rounds it over where the musculature would actually make it stand out. And I'm popping right here on the top of this cheek where I want to highlight to emphasize that cheek standing out. And why does it matter to me? And this is just me personally. It doesn't have to matter this way to you, but I like the dimension this creates in a couple different light conditions. Early morning, late evening, you know, basically when the birds are going to fly. Now I'm going to go to the crown in the forehead area, and I'm going to lift some of that and a little bit back here on the back of the neck, kind of to draw out and emphasize those shape differences, because that gives it a little more dimension when you do this, when the light hits it. So I pulled away from the shot, sorry, but that's one side. And you know, it's not the best lighting conditions to do this. I'm sorry if my furnace kicks on every once in a while. It's winter when I'm doing this and I'm out in the shop and I've got a furnace that runs out here, and sometimes it gets a little noisy. I'll try and talk over it, but with that angle, maybe you can see, and it's coming up in the light a little bit where you can see it. I'm going to do the other side now. I'm going to reload my brush just a touch. I don't want to heavy load these bristles. I want them to stay separated. I want them to stay clean. I don't want them to carry a ton of pigment to make a flat track on there. You'll find out if it's too wet, you'll get streaky little lines because it'll go in between the texture areas on the head. And that's not what we want to accomplish. So I'm going to go over and just round, and I'm rounding into that front cheek pocket right up to the edge of that terminal area where the bill meets the head. Come back here, round into this back of the cheek. Oop. Hope my camera doesn't slide off my platform. Pretty high tech. It's sitting on a piece of plexiglass over the top of my dust catching work spot. Back into the crown. I know there's a lot of time on this where you're just watching me brush this in, but that's kind of the technique. And if it doesn't really show up good in the light, hopefully I'll get a couple of still shots afterwards. I'll do a before and after for you. There you can kind of see that sort of light haze standing over. I'll come over here on the top, brush over the top a little bit. I'm going to do this one in green like it were a greater scalp, but that's just because I like the way it stands out. I could do it in purple, I could do it in the way a lesser is, but you know, honestly, I've seen iridescence on those birds that's a mixable from time to time, and every time we think we qualify nature as this and nature looks like that, nature says, oh yeah, watch this, and shows you something a little different. I'm just doing a little heavier dust, and I guess maybe dust is a good analogy to use on that. You want to have that dusty look on it. All right, I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a hairdryer that I liberated from my wife's collection of stuff, and I'm going to put a little heat to that. I'm going to make sure that that gray is set, and I'm going to clean my brush up all the way, get all the gray pigment off, and then I'm going to dry that brush off with the same hairdryer and make sure that I've got dry bristles again to go ahead and start with. But I'll take a still shot of this too so you can see it in a little better light. But that's how I lay in the base for my dry brush to add iridescence. All right, so here we go on to the color. Brush is completely dry again, dried off with a hair dryer. This time I've got some Traditions medium green. I'm loading my brush up with it. Again, I'm not loading up to the ferrule, I'm just getting the ends with a good bed of green. I'm gonna dust it off down here until I figure I've got enough of it off. Now I'm gonna go back to that gray, and I'm going to lightly at first brush it over the top. Hopefully you can see how some of that gray pigment is slowly picking up the green, and it's going green on the black. The cool thing about this technique is the soft edge you get in the color between the transition of the black to the green. I'll lose it in that light, but come over here and get my cheeks. And if I get a little bit on my bill, well, you know what? I can repaint that too. Let me shift this light, see if that makes a difference. Yeah, that helps. So you can see how that's picking up now. And I have not reloaded my brush at all. I'm actually going to scrub this on there a little bit. A little bit of pressure. Not so much pressure that I'm going to create streaks, but if I go right over the black, you can see how the tradition of painting, or the transition of painting right over that black's not picking up that green pigment, it's eating it up. And it's turning it so dark that it appears more like black than green, so I'm not getting it. But the cool part is the transition that makes between the black and the green. And go up here on the crown. Now I haven't reloaded my brush yet, so I'm going to see how light a green cast I get on that. I am getting a green cast. It's not super heavy yet, and I could keep scrubbing it. And I'll scrub some more in there, and I'm going to go right over that eye channel a little bit. Again, coming out of shot, sorry. I'm going to reload my brush just a little bit. I try to get my bristle bed, the tips of my bristles, I try to get them loaded pretty even. I come back over here, and when I'm doing this, I'm gauging how much pigment is showing up on that towel, and when not very much shows up, that's when I'm ready to go after this again and brush right over the top and scrub that in. And go to this crown and see if I can get a shot of that. There. Coming right over the top. And the black bed underneath the green is what's giving it the pop that makes it have the appearance of the iridescence. A little bit across the back of the neck. And I'm just doing one side to kind of show you the transition to how that travels and that pigment picks up on the way. And the same as before, I'll put some stills of this final dry brush of the color back in. And remember the deal too, if this isn't something that's working right away, if you got streaks, if it doesn't pick up, it's paint. Let it dry or push it dry with a hair dryer and paint it black again. And then try your technique again. All right, so there's the gray side with no pigment. There's the gray side now with that pigment worked in, kind of defining some muscle areas, giving some dimension to that bird on the water, the way that green will pick up the low light of early morning out on the bay, or towards the evening, put some more dimension out there on the water. Plus, you know, what the heck, if it looks cool and you like looking at it on a slow day, there's nothing better than having decent decoys to sit there and talk about or look at while you're drinking your coffee and eating your pie. So I'm going to do this side now real quick. Load that brush up again. Dump color. Check my towel. I don't have too much showing up, so now I'm going to go ahead and lay that green right over there. And I'm not concerned about hitting the black areas at all. I'm going right over the top of the black areas. I'm scrubbing it in a little bit, making sure that I pick up all the gray. I don't want to leave any gray pigment on there. I want the green to be all picked up and cover it. And again, if I go into areas that the green shows up and it's not where it's supposed to be, I'm going to paint over it anyway. So Here's a good look at across the top of the head, the crown of that transitioning into the green across the back of the neck. And the changes are subtle in the black. And don't get me wrong, the black does pick up some of this. Oh, sorry, I jumped out of your way again. I'm scrubbing pretty hard across the crown right now. The black will pick up some of the green, but it will not appear as bright as the green that's laid across that gray bed that's showing the intensity of the raw green. I want to get that area back there where I've got a little bit of gray showing up still, so I'm going to hit that one last go around, going over that area. Oops, I forgot you were there, sorry. Across the top of that head, just to pop that one more time. Crown, a little bit of gray here on that part of the cheek. Picking that up. Check this side. A little bit down here maybe. Intensify some of that in there. And I'm actually like circle scrubbing that in. Across the crown one more time. All right. I'm going to call that good enough for me. I'll take a couple stills, but so that's it. That's the technique for laying in color on that black field and making your iridescence without using the interference colors. Just regular flat paint that's has the appearance of having some depth and some color to it. All right. Well, I hope you get a chance to use it if you like that technique. I hope you kind of were interested in it a little bit. I was interested when I learned it, so I thought maybe you'd enjoy seeing it. So have a great day, and don't forget, be nice to each other.